I guess not many of you know that for this panel, the participants were supplied with a list of questions, which I think is a very good way to not just come up and spout off whatever comes to our mind, which is often the case of academics. And of those 9 questions, most of them had to do with the past. And this is in many ways what we were urged to address. But after hearing the opening remarks, I felt it inappropriate to kind of rain on our parade or snow on our commemoration. And so instead of looking at the past with some of the unpleasantnesses that were alluded to, I thought it might preferably be more useful to say something about the future, and actually it is addressing the last of those 9 questions that were given to us. How do you see the future of Ukrainian studies in the West? Now, that question seems to be asked almost by rote every decade or so. It is a question that has been addressed at conferences, whether in Canada or the United States, actually, in the last 40 years. And at those conferences or meetings, practitioners of our craft cobble together answers and proposals that are in the end supposed to make us feel that we have been and still are on the right track. We've just heard that I guess we're not. The last of these exercises took place in 2013 in Cambridge, Massachusetts, under the auspices of the Harvard Ukrainian Research Institute, using the antique Roman or Hollywood formulation, Quo Vadis, where are you going? Now, my view about the future has always been based on the challenges of the present, and I would say that those challenges have not changed since the early days of the Harvard experience in the 1970s. My concerns then are my concerns today. In short, we have too many university-based Ukrainian study centers and have trained too many Ukrainian specialists in North America. Quite simply, we have exceeded what the market can bear. Now, this was obvious, or should have been already in the early 1970s. The Harvard program provided itself on creating new cadres of Ukrainian historians and literary specialists, with, it seems, little concern for practical reality. In short, where were the members of that first cohort, Subtelny, Sisson, Haida, Kohut, Magocsi, to find jobs? In those days, there were no positions in Ukrainian history in the United States other than at Harvard. And considering that reality, I remember being somewhat surprised that the inspiration behind Harvard's Ukrainian program, Omilyan Pritsak, a tenured full professor in Turkic languages, himself took up in 1973 the Mikhailo Hrushevsky Professorship of Ukrainian History. He certainly didn't need that position, which then was closed off for several decades to any possible successor among the younger scholars that he had helped train. Now, aside from the self-serving nature of that academic move, neither Pritsak nor his successor in the Hrushevsky chair, Roman Shporluk, were historians of Ukraine. And neither did much for the field in terms of publications. the first person to hold the Hrushevsky chair who has actually done research and published works in topics central to Ukrainian history is the present Harvard incumbent, Serhiy Plokhy. Now, despite the absence of any employment future in their field of choice, Harvard continued to accept and train a second generation of specialists, not only in Ukrainian history, people like Olga Andrievska, Viktor Ostapchuk, but also Ukrainian literature, Oleg Khmelnytsky, Natalia Pilypyuk, Maxim Tarnavsky, Taras Koznasky. And then when the reality of joblessness sunk in, and when by the 1990s North American applicants were fewer and fewer, Harvard and sister institutions in Canada, Toronto, Alberta, began to accept graduate students from Ukraine. Most of these were desperate to experience life in North America. Most never finished the rigors of the PhD process, left academia, and often were fated to lead a precarious economic existence in either Canada or the United States. Now, while Harvard, Toronto, and Alberta produced a fair number of newly minted PhDs in history and literature, these often talented young scholars added a further strain to the competition for the few jobs available in Ukrainian studies. Now, fortunately for the first cohort of Ukrainianists trained at Harvard in the 1970s and 1980s, there was a safety valve, a saving grace: Canada. With no job prospects in the United States, many flocked to Canada, with the result that Harvard products such as Oris Subtelny, Robert Magocsi, Frank Sisson, Zenon Kohut, Oleg Khmelnytsky, Natalia Pilypyuk, Maxim Tarnavsky, Taras Koznasky, I mean, this list goes on, took up some of the leading Ukrainian-related academic positions at the University of Toronto and the University of Alberta. But that rather fortunate fate for those individuals did not, however, change long-term reality. And one must face that reality. Despite the Orange Revolution, the Maidan, Russia's invasion and continued aggression, Ukraine is never likely to attract a level of interest among North American university students that would sustain the several existing Ukrainian research institutes, endowed professorships, and departments which offer courses in Ukrainian-related subjects. Ukrainians are not Jews, and Ukraine is not France, Germany, Italy, or Russia. Ukraine is more like Spain, or Portugal, or Sweden. And I ask, where in North America is there a university-based institute for the study of Spain, or of Portugal, or of Sweden? Are not those countries and their civilizations at least as historically as important as Ukraine? Now, in that context, one might ask, why should Ukrainian studies have two institutes, several endowed professorial chairs in history, literature, language, ethnography? And at an organizational level, our field has not only reached its realistic limits, it has gone beyond them. Consolidation, even retrenchment, not expansion, would seem to be the appropriate approach for Ukrainian studies in North America. Having said that, Ukraine does remain a little known or misunderstood country in today's world. politically inspired propaganda from Russia has only contributed to the distorted view of Ukraine that seems to dominate public awareness in many parts of Europe and North America. That's also a reality that hasn't gone away. How then to correct this situation? Well, if we take what I just said, or if we remember what I just said before, what I'm now about to say might sound like a blatant contradiction. But let us fantasize. We need yet another Ukrainian institution, academically inspired, but not necessarily university-based. What I have in mind is something that could be called an International Center for the Study of Ukraine, to be comprised of 5 research institutes, each devoted to an aspect of Ukraine that has never been properly addressed, if at all, outside Ukraine. Those institutes would focus on the 5 areas: Ukrainian statehood, the peoples of Ukraine, the religions, plural, of Ukraine, the art of Ukraine, and the music of Ukraine. Since Ukraine is a state, should not the origins, evolution, and future of that state be a topic for research, public debate, proposals for its proper functioning? Hence, an institute for the study of Ukrainian statehood. Since Ukraine is a multinational country, should not peoples other than ethnic Ukrainians be studied and given a voice in the country's political and social discourse? Hence, an institute for the study of the peoples of Ukraine. And as for religious life, Ukraine's citizens are not only Eastern Christians, Greek Catholic and Orthodox, but also Protestants, Roman Catholics, Muslims, about which we know little, if anything. Hence, an institute for the study of the religions of Ukraine. Ukrainian arts do not consist only of folk embroidery and pottery. The country's painters and sculptors have been part of general European development, or in the case of the early 20th century avant-garde, they set the standards that the rest of Europe followed. And as for music, Ukraine is not only a land of folk songs and dances, but has produced first-rate orchestral and operatic composers in the 19th and 20th centuries who, alas, are virtually unknown to the outside world. Hence, an institute for the study of the music of Ukraine. Now, a body such as this proposed institute, or International Institute for the Study of Ukraine, and I am drawing to a close, would not only provide a base for scholars to carry out their research and publications, but would also provide the mechanisms to preserve and promote through exhibits and recordings the artistic and musical heritage still hidden from the rest of the world. Ukraine is a real country with a rich political, ethnic, religious, artistic, and musical culture. These are the elements which should become the face of Ukraine to the rest of the world. Now, fantasies, intellectual or otherwise, are fine. To be realized, they need concrete funds. These I have not yet found. Perhaps someone after me will take up this challenge. Thank you.